Hello, so just a disclaimer, this project is merely a fan concept. This is the first time I've ever made a concept on this scale, so just keep that in mind when giving criticism. I won't be including things like damage numbers or percents, but I will try to explain my thought process behind each piece. I also should state that I don't know everything about Destiny and its lore. I came into the game around the Witch Queen expansion, specifically during the Plunder season, so be a little forgiving and maybe correct me if I get a piece of lore wrong. Also, no AI was used in the making of this. All this art was drawn by myself. With that out of the way, let's proceed with the video. Currently right now, the game's future is uncertain to say the least. I personally believe that the only way forward for Destiny as a franchise is to move on to a sequel. But in order to justify a Destiny 3, Bungie needs to introduce something very game-changing like a new subclass, or in this case, a whole new class. Now with that in mind, I would like to present to you my concept for a whole new class in Destiny I call the Evoker. The idea for this concept actually first came from an Astacross video where he was discussing the future of Destiny, where it would go and what would justify a Destiny 3. In that video, he mentioned something along the lines of, what if they added another class to the game? Maybe something like a Beastmaster. And that's when I got inspired. I had to actually look up how a Beastmaster plays in other games because I don't have a ton of experience with MMOs, which helped keep my ideas within the scope of how the class should play. I had to also think about how a Beastmaster would fit into a looter shooter like Destiny, since it's not like most MMOs. So at first the class was going to be just called Beastmaster, but as the idea was expanded upon, I felt this name didn't really fit anymore. So next I went with Conjurer, but that didn't have a good ring to it, and it didn't really roll off the tongue. Then I chose Summoner to keep it simple, and that became its placeholder name for a while until I googled other words for summon and saw the word evoke, which I like the sound of and reminded me a lot of the way Eris Morn speaks and the words and rituals she uses. So I ran with it and chose the name Evoker. Now for the fashion. It's kinda hard to make a fourth class with a unique look considering how varied each class's armor has become, so I thought that maybe something like a poncho would stand out for their armor. While I really like this idea, it brings one of the problems with Warlock fashion, and that is that shoulder armor is tied to the chest plate rather than how the other classes handle it. On the contrary, the Evoker's class armor would not cover up the leg armor like the Warlock's robes do, meaning leg armor fashion would actually matter. Now, speaking of fashion, it's time to talk about the class item. I had some difficulty trying to choose what sort of clothing or armor I wanted to be the signature of the class. I had first wanted to do a backpack, but Bungie has since added chest ornaments that have actual backpacks to all the classes. So I thought about a grimoire, like them having a book on their hip that they grabbed and opened when the class ability is used. But this felt too close to the magical aspect of the Warlocks to me. After this, I had settled with a pelt that would go across the chest like a sash. This leaned into the animalistic aspect of the class, and I really liked this idea and was originally going to use it as the final choice, but I couldn't find a way for it to be used in the class ability itself. So after some time, I finally chose the class item to be a pendant. It would hang from the neck and the player could focus their light through it to conjure their summon. This also would give enough variety to the different cosmetic options. So this next part is something special I wanted to add to the class. What if the class item was somehow incorporated into the player's gameplay? The way this would work is that when the player uses their class ability, they would actually grasp their class item in their hands, and the summon would be conjured from the item. In order for this class to feel different, we would have to have a different gameplay loop or feel/style to the gameplay. Hunter is gunslinger and roguelike. Titan is about being up close and taking damage. Warlock has the wizardry and magic gameplay. So how would the Evoker class stand out? Well, what if we tried some sort of Beastmaster style gameplay that requires some management of summons to boost your team's power? Now onto one of the defining aspects of the class is the class ability. So the class ability has the player grasp onto its pendant, aka the class item, and then focus its light through it, and out pops what I call a summon, which is this entity of light created to aid you in fight. Enemies that would get damaged by the summon would be marked and then take increased damage. Also, each subclass would have a different animal for their summon. Arc subclass would spawn in a snake, Void would have a lion, Solar has a phoenix, Stasis a wolf, and Strand would have a spider. In Prismatic's case, it would be the chosen super that would determine which summon you got. How I went about choosing the animals for each subclass was actually pretty simple. The light subclass summons were chosen based off of the animals that represented each class in the Guardian games. This just felt like a natural choice. The Strand summon being a spider should be obvious. Strand has a lot of arachnid-like properties and abilities. There's also the entire Broodweaver kit for the Warlock, so this was an easy choice. For Stasis, I went through a few different choices at first, like a penguin, a polar bear, and even a leopard seal. But in the end, I chose the wolf because our Guardian gains the title of the Young Wolf when they become a new Iron Lord.
There was a time that only Iron Lords carried these blades. There are many like this in our armory, but this one is new. It is yours, Young Wolf. You are the first of a new generation. Take your place as an Iron Lord.
I first got the inspiration for the class ability from watching a lore video about Osiris. In it, it showed a cutscene from the Curse of Osiris expansion where he walked around and created these clones of himself to speak with the player, and I just thought that was so cool and unique, so I chose to use it as inspiration and came up with the idea of summons being manifestations of light shaped into an animal assistant.
Sagira, you shouldn't be here. You brought someone new with you.
Who? Oh, him? Get this. He's a friend of Ikora's.
Originally, I had chosen the animation for the class ability to be the player planting both their hands on the ground, creating a circle on the ground from which the summon would spawn in from. I got this idea from the summoning jutsu from Naruto, but I decided to change it because it felt too similar to how Warlocks originally casted their class ability, which is where I then came up with the idea of the player grasping their class item to conjure their summon. So something I wanted to do when coming up with the idea for the summons was to give it a little more depth than the Warlock buddies and their set it and forget it playstyle. So I decided to not only give the summons health pools, but also allow for the players to direct its attack at specific targets and areas. Doing so would cause the summon to leave this sort of unofficial radius that it kept within near the player and go out and attack enemies in that area or direction. But this comes with the risk of it dying sooner, so the player would have to watch and manage its health bar. Expanding on this further gave me the idea to have two modes of usage for the summons. The first is to aim the summon at a target or area and send them out to attack. The second was to recall the summon back to your side and regain or retain its remaining health. When back at your side, it would only attack enemies in your immediate vicinity and then return to you. The first mode could work like the Finality's Augur exotic weapon, where you create a turret and then aim it at an area of attack. These two modes would probably require 2 extra buttons needing to be added to the player's binding, but if we wanted to keep it simple but lose some of its versatility, it could just be tapping the class ability button and switching between the 2 modes only. But this would feel kinda clunky, to be honest, cause like what if you sent it out and wanted it to attack a different area now? You would have to tap the class ability button again, have it switch to the recall mode, then have to tap it once again to switch to the attack mode, and that just feels like one extra step too many. Also, holding down the class ability button binding would despawn the summon. Despawning the summon gives back class ability energy based on the amount of health the summon has when despawned. Now on top of the two modes, there will also be two variants to the class ability. The variants are a melee summon and a grenade summon. The melee summon empowers the player's powered melee while the summon is active, granting the melee ability an additional effect. The grenade summon empowers the summon itself while it's active, allowing it to apply subclass verbs on hit depending on which grenade the player has equipped. For example, the flashbang grenade would grant the summon the blind effect, while the other arc grenades would apply jolt. Now moving on to the class stat. So the way the class stat would work is that going over 100 class stat would give the usual overshield but also grant it to the summon, essentially increasing their health. I wanted to reward the player for investing in the class stat more, and this felt like the right option. Now onto the meat of this video, and where most of you guys will probably find the most interest in, the subclasses. Starting off with the Void subclass. So this is how I would imagine the subclass layout would look. I decided to have the player's guardian in the background put up their hands to show their fingertips, because with the way the class ability originally worked, it would have the player place their hands on the ground, so I wanted the fingertips to serve as a reference to that. Also, I forgot to touch on this earlier, but the class's default jump would be a simple double jump, much like the Hunter's double jump. I call this super the King's Call, which would summon a giant lion that would unleash this roar that doubles as a projectile and damages enemies on impact. It would also apply suppression to its targets. So the idea behind this is to have a one-off super that is also a projectile and could apply suppression, which we don't have a lot of access to outside of the suppression grenade. I really wanted to do something with a lion's roar, since that's the summon, and applying suppression felt right to me because lion roars are really loud and intimidating. Early on, I had the idea of the super just being a roaming super, where you run around with these large void claws, lion's mane, and even a tail, and strike with a slash for the light attack and a roar as the heavy attack, but this felt a little too close to the Titan Strand super. The powered melee for this subclass is called Keratin Claws. The player would strike forward with a slash using conjured void claws. This attack would have 2 charges and also deal increased damage to suppressed targets. The empowered version would now deal a second impact on each hit, further increasing its damage output. Next is the aspects. The first aspect for the Void subclass is called Lasting Justice. Defeating targets marked by your summon would fill a meter. When the meter is full, the next kill would proc an explosion and provide destabilizing rounds. I didn't put a whole lot of thought into this one and just wanted to provide something that I think would be fun to play around with. The second aspect is Power to the Masses. Damaging enemies with a melee attack now provides a small amount of Void Overshield, and power melees would provide a higher amount. I wanted to give some survivability and reward for playing up close. Now, something unique I did with this subclass is that I came up with a concept for a third aspect, but didn't make any icon art for it or add much details. To put it simply, the player would leap forward with their Void Claws to pounce on enemies. It would deal damage on impact and also upon landing. I got this idea from one of Wolverine's attacks in Marvel Rivals, where he leaps and drags enemies with him. So all of this combined would create for a playstyle where you'd close in the distance with the pounce, which would work in conjunction with Power to the Masses, and can follow up with your melee to get some survivability and reward playing up close. Next is the Arc subclass. The super is called Coiled Arc Flash. The player becomes enveloped by arc energy surging around them and then releases it, causing an explosion. Allies within the range of this explosion gain maximum bolt charge for 10 seconds. I wanted this to be a zone shutdown super. While the arc energy is charging up, it would also jolt enemies nearby. I added on the max bolt charge to provide some sort of team support or team play into it. Also, when the enemy is charging up around the player, it would charge up in the shape of a snake coiling around the player to give it some connection to the subclass summon. The first idea I came up with for this subclass's super was a roaming super that had your lower body become enveloped by a light construct in the shape of a snake's tail, essentially turning you into a snake person for a few, but I couldn't get the look right, so I went in a different direction. The arc melee is Rinkal's Strike. The player would have their summon appear wrapped around their arm and would then spit a continuous stream of venom at targets. The attack then leaves a pool of arc energy dealing residual damage to enemies that step in it. The empowered version would now apply blind to foes. One unique aspect of this melee is that the ability energy would be consumed over time during use instead of all at once. How this would work is, instead of just tapping the button once, you would instead hold down the button and expend the energy as long as you are using it. This would allow you to either do a quick attack and be able to follow up with another soon after once it's regained enough energy, or do an extended attack and take more time to regain the energy back. I also got the name Rinkal from a species of snakes that spit venom. The first aspect is Megawatt Mischief, where blinded enemies now detonate upon death. Additionally, collecting arc traces increases the duration of the blind effect when applied to a target. This would work in conjunction with Rinkal's Strike to provide a gameplay loop of applying blind and then exploding those same enemies. The second aspect is called Venom Tag. Blinded enemies now take damage over time. This means they would take an additional residual damage while they are afflicted with the blind effect. This residual damage is my way of playing into the Venom parts of the subclass. So altogether, this creates a playstyle that rewards applying the blind effect. Now to finish off the light subclasses, we now have the solar subclass. The super is called Phoenix Firestorm. The player summons a swarm of phoenixes that attack in a wide area of effect. Ignitions caused by the super deal increased damage. I just really like the idea of phoenixes just swarming an area. Originally the super was going to be a huge fireball shot from our phoenix, but I wanted to create something visually different than the Nova Bomb. The melee is called Peregrine's Glide. The player flies forward, damaging enemies in their wake. The player must be sprinting to activate, and defeating enemies applies restoration to the player. The empowered version now increases the glide distance. To add on to this, the player can also activate this in the air. The idea of gliding just felt right to me, and another detail that I forgot to add on is that the empowered version would have some solar wings appear on your back while in the animation. The first aspect is Flare Up. This aspect improves the player's sprint speed and jump height when your summon is active. Restoration extends this effect. I wanted this to work together with the Peregrine's Glide melee and give this class some more mobility. The second aspect is Burnout. Super damage now applies extra stacks of Scorch. Ignitions now provide ability energy. This aspect was made to work with the super. The idea is that the Phoenix Swarm would be causing multiple ignitions during its duration to add on to the damage. Now for the dark subclasses, starting off with Stasis. The super is Kamikaze Wolf Pack. The player conjures a continuous pack of summons that explode on impact. The explosions apply shatter damage, and the player can move freely after summoning the wolf pack. If you haven't guessed it yet, I got the inspiration for this from Gotenks' Kamikaze Ghost Attack in Dragon Ball Z. I even made the super icon in reference to how the ghosts look. The power melee is called Big Bad Howl. The player inhales air while conjuring stasis crystals and then shatters them with a mighty howl. The howl knocks back enemies slightly. The empowered version now creates additional stasis crystals. So this would be a charged melee where the charge happens while inhaling air and creating the stasis crystals and then releases once you do the howl. I got this idea from the Big Bad Wolf in Fairy Tales. The actual name though came from a now retired roller coaster called the Big Bad Wolf, and it was one of my favorite roller coasters growing up. Now to the aspects, starting off with Will of the Pack. Damage taken by the player and your summon is slowly converted into frost armor. Summons now have increased health. I wanted to make a way for the summons to have some more survivability while also providing you with extra durability. The art for this aspect depicts a pack of wolves surrounding a herd of sheep. The second aspect is strength in numbers. Enemies defeated by your summons now grant an extra charge to your class ability, up to 3 stacks, allowing multiple summons to be active at once. This plays into the whole wolf pack idea and provides something unique from the other subclasses by allowing you to have more than one summon on the battlefield. This was my favorite subclass to design, and I'm pretty satisfied with this idea. The whole wolf pack focus just sounds cool to me. And now for the final subclass, Strand. The super is Woven Carapace. The player conjures long strand legs, giving them a spider-like appearance. The light attacks are a Fang Strike, and heavy attacks are a lunge with impact damage. This would be a roaming super. This is pretty much just the original idea for the Strand Warlock super that Bungie never finished, which had the player turn into a giant strand spider. Now, this is actually not the first idea I had for this super. I made this a roaming super because I realized too late that I had not made one yet for the class. But I had already fully created the other supers, so I just decided to keep both, so now here is the second super concept. Nest of Threadlings. The player sends out a web of strand energy that creates threadling nests and suspends any enemies caught in the web. Additionally, threadlings spawned from the nest deal massively increased damage to suspended enemies. I really wanted to create an area effects super that also included the new threadling nest from the Service of Lusaka exotic weapon. The melee is another charged melee called Web Spin. The player focuses strand energy into their hands and shoots it out as a web. Fully charged melees suspend enemies. The empowered version would provide a small amount of melee energy upon kills, and suspended enemies give increased gains. Also, the player can still move slowly while charging up the melee. I wanted this to play into the idea of a spider shooting at webs and then killing the ensnared prey, and I believe the aspects also work well with this. The first aspect is Fiberline Traps. Fully charged powered melees now have a chance to leave behind a small strand web on the ground that suspends targets. This would work the same way the Wishkeeper's exotic's alternate fire works. A cool little detail about the art for this aspect is that the design actually comes from the back of a trapdoor spider, specifically the ones that have a coin-like appearance when sticking out of the ground. And now, lastly, the second aspect is called Prey to the Horde. Suspended enemies take increased damage from threadlings and summons now. This increased damage will be added onto the increased damage from the Nest of Threadling super. Like I said earlier, these aspects combined with the melee and the second super make for a playstyle that mimics a spider hunting for its next meal and feeding their offspring. Now, I know this isn't really an important part of the class concept, but I still wanted to create something for it. The Transcendence Activation Animation. The class item would float between the player's hands and then glow up when finishing the activation. I also made a Transcendence Grenade for the class. It would combine the Glacier Grenade and the Storm Grenade by first spawning a cluster of stasis crystals and then shattering them when the lightning strikes from the Storm Grenade. This would be a constant loop while the lightning is active, meaning it would keep creating clusters of stasis crystals to shatter for each lightning impact. And that's the Evoker class. This was a huge undertaking for me and took more than a year to finish since I just kept working on it slowly over that time. It feels weird to finally have it finished. Originally, I wasn't even gonna make concept art or anything for this idea other than some text in my notes app, which was getting way too long. There were a lot of things I wanted to add to this idea and stuff that I scrapped, which I'll show here, but I got to a point where I just wanted to finish this. Otherwise, I might have just kept going on and on and on and on with the ideas. I've made Destiny concepts before, but those were just for aspects, abilities, and supers for the other classes, and the art was much more simpler. I'm really satisfied with how this came out, and I hope you guys enjoyed this concept. I don't expect a new class to come with an eventual Destiny 3, but it would be something cool to have, which is what spawned this idea in the first place. Some people are gonna like this, some are gonna hate this, but I just wanted to do this for fun. Just a reminder, I am not a game developer, so keep that in mind when discussing things like balance for this concept. But otherwise, feel free to give me your criticism and let me know what you think in the comments below. And who knows, If this gets good reception, I may do more stuff like this. Thank you all for your time and for watching this, and I hope you all have a good one. Take care.